I wanted to talk about photographs. Now, keep in mind, this is my subjective experience, at least to start. Um, so I wouldn't have said that I had particularly strong body dysmorphia. I knew that I was underweight. I knew that I looked like shit. Um, I was still afraid of weight gain. I've been into that before. I'm not going to go particularly into all of that right now, but just talking about perception. So my perception of myself was that I was underweight. My perception of myself was that I was too thin. I didn't like that. However, when I looked at myself in the mirror, it's not like I looked at myself every day and went, oh God, bloody hell, there's a thin person. Sometimes I did, but I guess what happens is our brains get used to seeing ourselves. So you know how if you dye your hair a different color and then you get up next morning and you look in the mirror and you go, whoa, jeez, my hair's black. That's when you know it's because something's changed. So your brain is pulling attention to the fact that something's changed. And then as the days go by, you get used to your new color of hair and you stop having a reaction when you look in the mirror. You just look in the mirror and you're like, oh yeah, that's me. And so what happens, I think, for a lot of us is when we do get when we suppress our body weights, we then get used to seeing ourselves at a suppressed body weight. And so we don't react with that, oh shit, I look awful reaction. Unless, of course, you have body dysmorphia, in which case you don't think you look too thin. You might think the opposite. But what used to really stand out for me, though, is if I saw a picture of myself. It could have been a picture of myself that was taken 5 minutes before, and then if I was then look at it, I'd be like, oh God, that person looks awful. Oh shit, that's me. And so it really interests me that seeing a photo of myself would help me shift that sort of homeostasis of perception filter that's not really noticing me. And then seeing a photo would make me notice me in the same way I might notice a person who wasn't me. And so the other thing that I used to find would do the same sort of thing would be any reflection I might find of myself or get of myself that was not straight on looking in the mirror. So say if, you know how a lot of the time shop windows are kind of at angles, and as you're walking towards it, you might see the shop window at a different angle and you see yourself at a different angle. That would stand out to me. I'd be like, oh, wow, oh, God, I look awful. Whereas if it was just me in a mirror, then face on. But any sort of mirrors, you go into some people's bathrooms, they've got mirrors all at different angles. If I saw myself in a reflection in a different mirror, then I would notice myself. And that's like that perception thing, with that perception filter of not noticing how thin I was would have been lifted, and I would notice. And so the interesting, I used to just think, when I had an eating disorder, I used to just think, oh, well, maybe it's that I just don't like seeing photos of myself. Maybe it's something to do with the photo of myself that makes me go, oh, I look awful. But that doesn't happen anymore. Now that I'm not a suppressed body weight, I see a photo of myself and it's like that photo of the self matches the image of myself that my brain already holds. So I'm just like, oh, that's me. And so that's a really important and I think interesting perception thing, is that even though I didn't have a very strong body dysmorphia, the image of self that my brain held was not of a person who was drastically underweight. And sometimes I'd see a glimpse of myself in a shop mirror, or I'd see a photo of myself, and that altered angle or that altered whatever a photo does to our perception would contrast, would be different from that image of self that I held in my brain. Now that I'm fully recovered, not as a suppressed body weight anymore, that doesn't happen. If I catch a glimpse of myself at an odd angle, I'm like, that's me. If I see myself in a photo, that's me. There's not that difference. And so even for those of us that do not have, I think, for those of us that do not have massive body dysmorphia, it's not like I ever looked at myself and thought, oh God, I look fat. Never, ever. Ever. I always knew I was underweight, but it was like the degrees of how awful I looked that my brain didn't, my perception of self when I was just sitting around my house or looking straight on the mirror, that part of my brain thought, all right, well, I might look a bit kind of underweight, but I don't look awful. Whereas if I took that photo perception, I'd be like, oh shit, I look awful. And so that's somebody that doesn't have body dysmorphia. So then you've got to take that and see that if a person does have body dysmorphia, that's the same thing, it's just amplified. It's they're looking at themselves and their internal sort of ideal of self is, I look overweight or whatever it is. And then usually when they see a picture of themselves, that also changes. And that's why I said it's subjective, because I didn't have this experience, but I have also worked with people who have had the experience of, if they see a photo of themselves opposite to me, who I would see a very thin person, they don't see that. That's even amplified. The change is amplified. And I don't think that there's that all of this stuff and perception, we don't know a ton about it, honestly. But what I definitely see and felt in myself with people with eating disorders is just our perception of self is out of whack in all the ways. Our perception of self that our normal brain holds as that internal image of what I look like, that's out. But then we only tend to notice that's out when we actually see a photo of ourselves or catch ourselves in a different reflection. But what I've also noticed with people with eating disorders is when we do actually get that altered image, that different image that helps us understand that our perception's out, for a person who has body dysmorphia, it actually increases how much that perception's out. So there's not even like a sort of set way it goes. For each individual, I think there's going to be a perception gap. There's going to be a gap between how you see yourself just in your internal brain and then if you see yourself from an external view, there's going to be a gap there. But that can go either direction dependent on the individual and whether they have body dysmorphia or not. And I do really dislike the generalizations that everybody with an eating disorder has body dysmorphia, because I know that that's not true. I never saw myself as overweight. I never really saw myself as larger than I was. I was under no illusions of how underweight I was, and I didn't like it. And I think it's just a very overly simplistic view that all people with eating disorders see themselves as morbidly obese. I hate those pictures that you get of, oh, a person with anorexia looking in the mirror and seeing a fat person. It's just overly simplistic, and I don't think it helps people understand how complex eating disorders are. And I don't think it helps some people understand that eating disorders, while they are about fear of weight gain, they're not always about actually wanting to change your body weight, for some of us at least, which is bizarre, but eating disorders are bizarre. Okay, all right, I gotta go, bye.